Albion Online is a sandbox MMORPG game with full loot PvP, player-driven economy, and much more. And I've been playing this game for the past 4 years, and I played the last 2 betas when the game wasn't even released. And then of course I played on the launch. And overall I would say that between 3 of my accounts I have more than 2000 hours played. So with that said, today we will look into the character customization, solo and group PvP/PvE content, then what is Albion all about, and then I will give you an actual perspective from an old player that's been playing this game casually for many years. And then at the end I will give you my conclusions and tell you the pros and cons of the game and if Albion Online is worth playing. So without any further ado, let's get right into it. Then first of all, we will take a closer look at the character customization, so how easy and in-depth you can make your character, and then how outfits and skins work in this game. In general, you can create 3 characters per account, and as Albion Online is on one main server, at least at the start you won't need anything more than just one character. Then in character creation, you picked between 9 different avatars, and don't worry because you can change them anytime you want. And it really doesn't matter which one you pick, because it won't change anything and it is just a simple avatar which players when clicking on you will be able to see. So you choose avatar, the gender and click next. And here in customization you can pick between 5 face expressions, bunch of skin colors and etc. Remember again that all of this is not permanent and you can change on how your character looks anytime in the game. So what I personally like to do is click the randomize button till I get a character I like and then click next. And here last but not the least you can type your name and click create. And as this game is do whatever you want type of sandbox game, so you can easily complete the simple tutorial and go to one of the 6 cities. So at the first look and probably what is going to take about an hour seems to be so far so good. And last but not the least, before we move on to the next section for this game, if at any time you want to change how your character looks like, just click on your avatar in the left side corner and click appearance, from which you will get 4 tabs. The first one is to pick and select between different avatars, then the second one is the same character customization like when you were creating your character at the start, and then lastly we have the third and fourth section for character outfits and mount skins. So in a quick summary, like in any other MMORPG, you can buy or collect different skins for your gear and mounts. Some skins you can buy for gold, which is in-game currency. Then some other skins you can only buy using your wallet, and lastly what I do and most of the player base do is to go to auction house, type the gear skins or mounts name and buy the skins activator for silver, which is the currency in the game. And you can earn it for doing basically any activity in Albion. As this game has no class system, any player can use every single piece of item if they just level that gear up. And before we go into all the weapons and builds, you first of all have to understand on how leveling works in Albion. So first of all, there aren't any character levels, and experience is called fame. So from now on, when I tell you fame this or fame that, remember to keep in your head that fame equals experience. So if that is clear, now we press B key and this opens the big old Destiny board. And it is split to 4 categories, like the Fighters category, then here is the Farmers category, then the Gatherers category, and lastly we have the Crafters category. And this game in general has 8 tiers, so you start at tier 1, and when you level up your weapon, crafting or gathering, you earn fame, aka the experience, which will put you in tier 2, 3 and etc. So by simply putting it, by using one item you can level it up, and the more levels you get on that item, you can unlock more abilities and unlock more tiers, so you can wear better and better items. Each item or weapon has its own category, so for example, if I am a dagger player, I level this dagger category, while at the same time the category is split to 7 individual weapons. So when I'm leveling for example a one-handed dagger, I level up that whole dagger category and specifically my one-hand dagger, which again has separated 100 levels for only that specific weapon. And the higher level you get it, the higher and stronger the individual weapon gets. So let's repeat it. The game has a Destiny board which is split to 4 categories, and each category has a smaller groups or categories, which usually consists of 7 different weapons or items. And then separately you can level them up by using the one individual item. And then as for choosing your own build, the game has 3 types of gear, and it's called the cloth armor, leather armor and plate armor. Again, each armor type has under 7 different specific gear pieces, so you just simply mix and match them for a specific build. There aren't any restrictions for gear, you can use each item category, but obviously each piece of cloth armor will give you more damage but will get less health. Then each leather armor will give you medium damage and medium health, and lastly each gear of plate armor will give you a lot of health but low damage. And as this is a review and not a Albion beginner's guide, I will leave this section at that, but if you're interested in the best weapons or builds, check my other Albion videos, link in the description. Now let's take a closer look at the player-driven economy. So you can gather in this game 5 materials and the 6th one is fishing. You can gather fiber and turn it into cloth, which is used to craft cloth armor. Then you can mine ore and turn it into bars and then craft weapons or plate armor. And the same things repeat for skinning, wood gathering or lumberjacking, and lastly we have the stone quarrier, which is the only material that you use to build buildings. And now let's press M and take a look at how the world looks like. So first of all we have 2 continents or islands. First one is the Royal Zone, where you start as a new player, and then we have the second zone, which is about 4 times bigger. And it's called the Black Zones, where basically most of the endgame full loot PvP or PvE happens. And then each continent is filled with a bunch of smaller zones that are connected between each other. And again those smaller zones are split into different biomes. So we have the forest biome, then the snow, swamp, high hills and the desert. And each of them are indicated in their biome colors, and when you click on a specific biome zone, you can see the zone's layout, and on the top you can read the name and the materials that you can gather. Then moving back a little bit to the big old world map, the zones still are categorized a little bit more, so each zone goes from tier 1 to even tier 8. And the tier indicates on what type of mob you will encounter and what type of highest material you'll be able to find. And then lastly, each zone after the tier number has a different color square. So the Royal Continent has blue zones, yellow zones and red zones. So blue zones means that no players can attack you, then yellow zones mean that players can attack you but they have to flag for PvP, and if anyone gets killed in a yellow zone they don't lose any gear that they are wearing, but only they will get knocked down for 2 minutes. And lastly we have the red zones, which are the same as yellow zones where players can flag up for PvP, but this time if a player gets killed in a red zone he loses all of his equipment that are in his inventory. And then for the second continent, aka the black zones, we have the zones indicated with a black square and a skull, where there's again full loot PvP, but every single player in that zone is flagged and can kill or be killed from anyone. So now let's comment on the system. When new players hear about full loot PvP games, they straight away think that this is a hardcore game where you will be killed or you have to go PvP. But actually I know players that have not done any PvP for years and haven't lost a single item. Because if you just play in safe zones and the Royal Continent, you can do gathering and crafting and play this game this way and be 100% safe, if you know what you are doing. As well, when you enter safer zones, you will see how many players are flagged for PvP, so you get even more protection, and all you need to know is how to use Albion game mechanics. And if you don't want to, you don't ever have to lose gear or go PvP if that is what you choose. Again, like I mentioned, if you want a full in-depth gathering guide, check my Albion guides out. And lastly, I didn't know where to put it in the video, but all the materials that you gather you can sell them to other players or use to craft gear, weapons and etc. Crafting in this game is not super complicated, so you just simply click on an item or gear piece that you want to craft, and then below the weapon stats you will find the resource that you need to craft them. Of course, if you want to be a high tier crafter, you start crafting tier 1 gear, then level it up to tier 2 and go so on and so forth. And lastly, I recommend for players to craft in different cities, because each city has as well crafting bonuses that you can find on pressing N and then clicking on the little arrow icon. And if I didn't mention this at the start, every single city there are crafting stations, which you pay a little bit of silver for using them, but there you can craft everything in the game you want. And by the way, all the crafting stations and even the cities are owned by the players or guilds. Okay, and now I just wanted to make it separate, but let's take a look at how the economy and money making works in Albion. So there are 2 currencies, silver and gold. Silver you can earn from doing every single activity in the game, which we will go into later. And then gold is currency that you can buy using real money or convert the silver that you earned in the game and change that silver for gold in a place called the gold market. Like in real life, the more players buy or sell gold, the more or less silver 1 gold is worth. And right now, at the time of recording, you can buy gold for 2,848 silver. And this is another way that you can make money. But then how you primarily make money besides killing mobs is by selling your items to different players. So there is a system in place called the auction house, where each auction house is only bound to a city. So if there are 6 cities, there are 6 different auction houses with 6 different prices for all the same items. So like in any other MMORPG, you can put for sale items and other players will be able to buy it and vice versa. And then lastly, I want to mention that we have another auction house called the Black Market, where if you go to a city called the Caerleon, you can sell items to an NPC, which depending on how much that item is rare or how much it costs, you can sell the items to the game itself, and then those items that you sold will be able to be found by other players from open world chests and things like that. So in a quick summary, you can make money in Albion by killing players, stealing their loot and selling it, or gathering materials and crafting items and then selling those items in the auction house. Of course, there are more unique ways that you can make money by transporting goods from one place to another, so you buy where it's cheaper and sell it where it's more expensive. But in short, this is how the game money making system works. And as well, not to give players too much money for selling or buying items, you have to pay small taxes, and when a player dies and other players loot his items, there is a 30% chance that some items will turn into trash. So if you kill a player that is worth 1 million silver, you may only loot from him 300,000 worth of equipment. So there is this type of RNG, and at the times that you will get a lot of trash you will be sad, but at the times that nothing will trash and you will get the full loot with million silver worth of equipment, you will be very happy. Then the fifth category for Albion Online is of course the PvP aspect. So first of all, there are 2v2, 5v5 and 10v10 hell gates that are basically small instant dungeons where you will kill few mobs in between, and each hell gate that you enter, your team will match up against another team and you can fight to the death. The winner gets the loser's loot and can open the final Hellgate's boss chest with more equipment. And as well, there is a ranking system, so each time you kill players you get infamy, which you can collect to get better loot drops and just climb the leaderboards. And then we still have the same system for 1v1s, but that is called the corrupted dungeons, where you enter again a small arena where you kill mobs and match up against another player and winner takes it all. Then for more 5v5 content, we have 5v5 arenas and CGVGs. So 5v5 arenas are random matchmaking battlegrounds where random players can queue up with other random players and fight in a 5v5, where you capture points and kill other players. This is fully with no loot dropping, so by dying you just respawn back to your base, and it is a simple and easy way to test out your builds and try 5v5 combat. But I want to quickly mention that a lot of times your teammates will be bad, so be ready for noob players and just don't try too hard in 5v5 arenas. But then for the second 5v5 activity we have the CGVGs, which are called the Crystal Guild versus Guild fights. So again, the same concept applies, like in arenas, just this time you get 5 of your friends, or you just specifically have to get 5-player team, and then at the specific times queue up against another pre-made 5-man team and fight. Capture points, and this time full loot PvP is enabled. And then lastly, as a solo or group player you can go open world ganking, which basically entails that you run around different open PvP zones and attack other players, gathering materials and steal their loot. And then for big group fights we have 20v20 fights where guilds fight for the control of different cities. And if they win, they get the city and can collect taxes from other players using the city's crafting stations or the auction house. And then if you really want to experience low FPS gameplay but 100 vs 100 fights, then try out the Faction Warfare or ZVZs, which basically are high tier guilds fighting other high tier guilds in open world for the control of different points, zones, and most of the time for the control of castles. But of course the 5 vs 5, 20v20 and 100 vs 100 requires for you to have an active guild. So in conclusion, this game has plenty of PvP content, and no matter what, if you're a solo player or like to play with groups, you will find a lot of PvP things to do. Okay, and as we just took a look at the PvP, now we have to go to the opposite side and go over the PvE activities in the game. So of course, first of all, you can gather materials, which extensively already I covered, so I won't repeat the same things again. But then besides that, players can own their own islands and build houses for extra storage, or perhaps build farms and grow different plants or tame animals and grow different mounts. As a new player, I would not recommend to get into this line of PvE, but for endgame this will be very profitable, and basically by doing this farming thing once a day for 5 to 10 minutes, you'll be able to make a bunch of money passively. And now the biggest PvE content, aka the fame farming. So when players mention fame farming in Albion, it means killing mobs for fame. So you can do it in expeditions, which are 5-man instance dungeons, which have maps and different difficulties for more or less fame. And then we have the open world mobs, where you can kill mobs all around the zones, then maybe even kill big world bosses and go into groups or solo player dungeons and just kill mobs to level up your gear and weapons. So overall, there are a bunch of PvE content to do, but if you just want to make money and not kill mobs, there are items called the Tomes of Insights, which the other players can sell you, and you basically can buy fame for silver. So now we have come to the final part, where I will give you my final thoughts and tell you how I really feel about the game. So if you are still watching, you just went through a quick overview of Albion Online and how everything works, what are the most important things that you can do, and much more. So for as a solo player, this game is definitely easy and very friendly for you. You have a 1v1 PvP content to do, you can gather, do open world ganking or anything else you want. You are only restricted and won't have access to 5v5 and 100 versus 100 fights. And you will have to be more careful when moving around the map, as many player groups will be roaming the open world. But if you follow my guides, you don't have to worry about none of that stuff. Then for group players, you again can do every single thing that solo players can and even more. The only thing that you have to do is get into the guild. If you just started the game, you'll have to join a smaller guild which has lower requirements. And the more you get experience and get higher stats, the more higher tier guilds will accept you. So this means that not all content is unlocked right away when you start playing the game. And as for the players not wanting to lose their gear, you can easily gather in high tier zones if you're careful, and even you can do PvP in lower tier zones where if you die you don't lose anything. So remember when I mentioned the 5v5 Hellgates or the 1v1 corrupted dungeons? Well, if you enter them through blue or yellow zones, you'll be able to do them without the full loot PvP aspect. So of course that means that you won't get the enemy's loot either, and the fame on money for the chests won't be that good. But you still have the option to do most of the things that other hardcore players can, just with no risk whatsoever. Then let's answer the question if Albion Online is pay to win. To be honest, this is one of the least pay-to-win games I have ever played, and most of the real-life money gets used to buy simple outfits and other cosmetic items. And lastly, there have been few cases that players swipe their credit card for gold and then exchange for silver, and now it seems like they're super rich. But what actually happens is most of the time there are players spending money, some other high tier players kill them in open world combat and get all of their hard earned money for absolutely free. So when players spend money for more silver, in Albion it just goes back to the player base, and instead of players farming for 2 hours in corrupted dungeons, he just pays for it with real life money, and I see no problem or difference whatsoever. This game hasn't had any pay to win problems for over 4 years now, and I don't see any reason why it would change. And then now, last but not the least, let's go over the pros and cons about Albion Online. So this game right now is super popular with the free-to-play option on mobile devices that has been happening for 2 months now. So for sure you will definitely find thousands of players to do fun stuff with. Then as I mentioned, this game is more solo player and group friendly than any other game, and you can easily do some parts of the game and then don't do any other parts and nothing is required, so you can play the game the way you want. Then as for my negative things, Albion Online community is very toxic and it is just a fact. In full loot PvP games it is just what it is, so you just have to accept it. And then my second biggest problem is that there are not locked classes and you can play the game the way you want. And it gives players with a low self-confidence the option to abuse meta weapons and most importantly, use healer builds in 1v1 dungeons and try to abuse the system, and for some reason the Albion developers completely seem to ignore the balancing weapons and healing staff in particular. And the last thing is that even no matter how good you are as a player or how expensive or high tier your build or equipment is, some builds just always can counter other builds, so there's never a build that can win every single fight. So this may be a good thing for some players and bad for others, but be aware of that if you are a hardcore player, you will have to spend time getting fame and leveling up your weapon. And sometimes even if you do all the things right, you still may lose a fight, and that can be very frustrating after a while. But overall, this game has a lot of good content for any type of player. And don't get discouraged of when you hear full loot PvP, because you can easily lose cheap gear 100 times and technically you have lost gear, but when it costs very little you will get used to it and you will really forget about the full loot aspect. And at the end of the day it will be like 50% of the time you will kill someone and steal his gear, and the other 50% of the time someone else will do it to you. So at the end of the day, you won't be losing absolutely nothing, but just trade money and gear between players. So the answer to the question if Albion Online is worth playing in 2021, yes, of course. It is free to play, so there is nothing to lose except your time and dignity. And Albion has really grown in these 4 years, so if you're a returning player, give this game a second chance and you won't regret it. So I really do appreciate everyone for watching, guys, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any suggestions, feedback or different opinions about Albion Online and is it worth playing, then feel free to leave your comments in the comment section down below. And while you're doing that, please click like, subscribe and enable that notification bell, so this way you could support the channel and you won't miss any more amazing content from me. With all this said, you have an amazing day and I will catch you in my next video. So take it easy, peace.
Yo, I ain't here for the